Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us so much. I'm Nicholas Bassi, and I'm thrilled to be Chief Operations and Programs Officer for the African Diaspora Network, or affectionately referred to as ADN. For those of you I haven't yet met, I joined the team about 4 months ago, but have been plugged into the ADN network for more than a decade. As you know, we are here today to engage in a dynamic conversation on accelerating Africa's research and innovation through diaspora partnerships. This is a topic that ADN is very excited to bring to you today. But before we begin that part of our discussion, I'd like to share just a bit about ADN's impact and the work that has led us to this point here today. 15 years ago, ADN was born from a bold belief that the African diaspora, when connected, trusted, and mobilized, could be a powerful force in shaping the future and strengthening global African communities. We have established ourselves, with your help, as a platform dedicated to mobilizing the intellectual, social, and financial capital of Africans in the diaspora, Friends of Africa, and Africans on the continent to drive inclusive economic growth. What began as a community-supported initiative has grown into a globally recognized organization advancing entrepreneurship, innovation, and social impact through strategic partnerships and high-impact programs. ADN's focus has been and continues to be moving beyond charity and remittances to shared ownership, long-term investment, and collective problem solving. Our community has grown beyond programs to people, entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, policy leaders, creatives, philanthropies, all allies, and all galvanized by a shared commitment to Africa's potential and the diaspora's responsibility to effectively engage it. Over the last decade and a half, ADN has helped to shape a new way of thinking about diaspora engagement in capital markets, scientific research, healthcare, and a range of other impactful topics. These topics and more are the focus of our 2026 African Diaspora Investment Symposium, also called ADIS 26, which will be held the 25th through the 27th of next month at Santa Clara University in Silicon Valley. The robust conversation held here today will be continued there, and I can assure you that you do not want to miss it. Registration is still open, so please register today if you have not already. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to email us anytime at ADIS, that's ADIS, at africandiasporanetwork.org. We are also thrilled today to unveil our 2025 Impact Report. And as you dig into it, you'll read descriptions of how, over the past 15 years, we have launched innovative technology, introduced African startups to a global audience, invested in entrepreneurs, funded Africa's youth, facilitated strategic partnerships, and accelerated Africa's research and development. We have designed and delivered entrepreneurship programs to support African, diaspora, and Africa-facing entrepreneurs at critical stages of growth. Through Accelerator programs, pitch platforms, mentorship, and peer learning, we have equipped founders with practical tools, networks, and capital readiness support to strengthen their enterprises and, most importantly, expand their impact. We have also engaged you, scientists, entrepreneurs, and allies across the continent and in the diaspora to create connections and opportunities for partnerships and scientific collaborations. We are thrilled to have deepened this work through a partnership with the Gates Foundation, working collaboratively for you and your colleagues. Together, we have rebranded the African Scientific Community Engagement Program, known as ASCE, into the Grand Challenges African Diaspora Engagement Accelerator. The program has a new name, but it's built on the same work and the same ethos that brought each of you to this webinar today. ADN remains busy in 2025, advancing the work that engaged many of you during 2025. We launched the African Diaspora Innovation Fund, which is a catalytic platform to mobilize diaspora and ally capital for social entrepreneurs. The Accelerating Business, Leadership, and Entrepreneurship, or ABLE program, elevated Black founders and innovators. Our Builders of Africa's Future, or BAF initiative, expanded its network and visibility for early-stage African entrepreneurs. We developed and are scaling groundbreaking partnerships with innovative African and US-based organizations that expand our reach, deepen our impact, and open new pathways for shared success. Each of you is critical to accomplishment of that shared vision. Today's discussion, which was carefully constructed by our colleague, Dr. Fredra Sukumu, who unfortunately cannot join us today, centers on practical examples of diaspora-led partnerships that have strengthened laboratories, graduate training, and data platforms across Africa. Our trailblazing panelists, whom you'll meet shortly, are institutional leaders and diaspora experts who are excited to share their views on what it takes to build equitable, high-impact collaborations, successful diaspora Africa partnerships, and describe their research capacity and innovation, strategies, policies, and funding mechanisms that support sustainable, equitable collaborations, and the power inherent in engaging directly with African institutional leaders and diaspora scientists to identify co-creation opportunities. ADN is thrilled to partner with you all here today and look forward to continuing our discussion in person at August 26th next month. In the meantime, however, I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Susan Winks to help us set the context for this discussion here today. Dr. Winks is Head of Research Operations and Business Development for the H3D Foundation at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, where she leads a team focused on interdisciplinary drug discovery. H3D is described as Africa's first holistic drug discovery and development, that's the 3Ds, center, and it was founded in April 2010 to pioneer world-class drug discovery in Africa. Dr. Winks, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, and thank you to ADN for the kind invitation to bring me here today, and for everybody who's joined online to listen to this important conversation. So today's conversation is fundamentally about unlocking Africa's scientific potential through partnerships rooted in trust, reciprocity, and shared purpose. We know that Africa has a vibrant scientific community, talent. We've got pockets of research excellence, but our ecosystem is fraught with constraints. We have infrastructure challenges. We've got uneven funding. We've got talent leaving the continent, and we've got insufficient platform collaboration between our institutions. I can share some of our learnings that we've had, both from H3D, the Drug Discovery Center at the University of Cape Town, as well as from the network that we've been establishing. So we've been working to build a Pan-African drug discovery network, also funded through the Gates Foundation. The grand challenge is African Drug Discovery Accelerator. And this network started about 2.5 years ago. We currently have 8 African countries linked in, 23 research institutions, 38 full members, and 4 flagship drug discovery projects. While we're trying to build and strengthen this ecosystem, bringing in partners, particularly the diaspora partners, becomes a critical part of that strategy. When we think about how we can capitalize on this asset, which is all the incredible scientists which were trained and born on the continent and have since left and had fruitful careers elsewhere, how do we capitalize and bring some of that scientific excellence back in some way to help accelerate what I want to refer to as our shared problems? We're not only working to address problems in Africa, we are working to address global problems with an African mindset. So if we think practically, how have we approached engaging with diaspora? And I think it's important when we think about the scientists across the world who might want to get involved in what we're doing on the continent to realize that many of them, or most of them, will actually have full-time careers. They have different levels of ability to engage. So it's not one size fits all. There needs to be a buffet of opportunities for them to engage and connect with us. And if we make it easy for the diaspora to connect with us, then we make it easy to start seeding and accelerating and growing what we're doing on the continent. Some examples of this, for example, scientific exchange, whether it is coming and visiting one of the research communities we have and helping to share what you've learned and mentoring the scientists, or even hosting an African scientist in your labs to give them exposure so they can come back and build that capacity locally. There are also examples of skills development. And here it can be as simple as offering your knowledge for an online webinar, just giving some of your time. Or it could be that you have some training material that you've developed in your own research institute that you can make available. You could come and help with in-person training, which is always really valuable and really does help to bring practical skills to the next generation of scientists. One of my favorite ways of actually engaging with diaspora is through our mentorship program. And we currently run a formal mentorship program where we match industry experienced scientists with emerging researchers on the continent with some light touch structure to help them through that mentorship journey. And with the program we run, we give the mentor an opportunity to engage easily. We build that connection, we give them the tools, and we also have a concrete end to the program to help close out. We do find actually that our mentors that have engaged, they often want to continue engaging beyond the period of the formal program, and they build these long-term friendships, which can lead to collaborations and other things. We have also, many of our mentors want to come back and have many mentees, and they sign up year after year to continue engaging. And one of my favorite stories is actually one of our mentors who returned to the continent to set up a clinical facility here, again, motivated to see the work that is actually ongoing in Africa. There are other ways that diaspora can get involved as well. So, for example, through sponsoring or supporting emerging scientists, or donations of equipment that they may no longer need in their own facilities. There are many easy ways of connecting, and it's about finding the right way that you can give back and get involved with what we're co-creating. Ultimately, I think that the gold standard of what we're hoping to achieve through building these relationships with diaspora is, can we reach a point where we're actually working collaboratively on these joint projects, co-creation, to collectively solve these problems, which are not African problems, they are global problems, but let's work together. But in order to get to that point, we need to build trust. And I think this is where we found in our experience that starting with ways of engaging which require less formal commitment, the time commitment can be a concern as well. How do we find an easy way to start to build that relationship? And then as the relationship nurtures and matures, there's enough trust and reciprocity and mutual benefit that we then start to see, yes, we actually can work together and have these fully fledged joint collaborative projects. So I would like to say today, so for the panel discussion, I'm excited to hear from all my colleagues across the continent about their experiences as well, and how they're working and engaging with diaspora. And I think we have an exciting lineup with breadth of experience from across the continent. So Nicholas, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Winks, for your thoughtful comments, especially about our collective buffet of opportunities. Through your comments, you set rich context for the rest of our discussion here today, which will be moderated by our colleague, Dr. Janet Medega. Dr. Medega is Senior Research Manager for the Wellcome Trust Drug Resistant Infections Program, and there she provides scientific leadership, program development, and management support to the Surveillance and Epidemiology Program on antimicrobial resistance. So Dr. Medega, thank you again for being here with us today, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and thank you to Faduma and the ADN team for this opportunity and for organizing this webinar. And of course, welcome to everyone who has joined us today for this important discussion. So I will start by introducing our panelists today. We have Professor Gordon Awandare, who is a Pro-Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at the University of Ghana, and he's a professor and founding director of the West African Center for Cell Biology and Infectious Pathogens, commonly called WACBIP, and he's also project director for the Africa Climate Collaborative at the University of Ghana. And Gordon holds a BS in biochemistry, an MPhil degree from the University of Ghana, and he completed his PhD at the University of Pittsburgh, where he also did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Walter Reed Army Research Institute. So welcome, Gordon, and thank you for joining us. Next, I will introduce Dr. Ifeniwa Anibo, who is an associate professor of molecular biology and genomics at the Institute of Genomics and Global Health in Nigeria, and also a principal investigator strengthening Nigerian surveillance system by integrating molecular genomic data as part of the country's malaria elimination strategy. And I'd also be happy to note that Dr. Anibo is also a fellow of the Aspen Institute in the US. Next, I will introduce Professor Akere Omonhua, who is Professor of Medical Biochemistry, and her research focuses on elucidating the molecular mechanisms of local plants that are used in disease treatment. And she has done a lot of work around the performance of COVID-19 diagnostic tests in Nigeria, and is also investigating factors underlying high dizygotic twinning rates in Igbo Ora in Nigeria. And her work spans interestingly identifying plant compounds involved in managing diabetes, a serious condition in Africa, as well as reproductive conditions, research capacity building, and of course, Dr. Omonhua is currently the Chief Executive Officer of AREF, which supports African health researchers towards developing them into research leaders. Next, I will introduce our third panelist, who is Dr. Tolula Oni. And Dr. Oni is a clinical professor of global public health and sustainable development at the University of Cambridge, and is also founder and CEO of Urban Better. Prof. Tolula is born in Lagos, living in the diaspora, and she is a Pan-African public health physician and an urban epidemiologist working across Africa, and also globally at the intersection of urbanization, climate, and health, all which are very, very important aspects of our conversation today. And her work focuses on building institutions, partnerships, and evidence for implementable and investable solutions that ensure health, climate resilience, and inclusive urban development. Notably, Professor Oni has over 150 academic publications and is a fellow of leading global science, policy, and innovation networks, as well as advancing diaspora-led pathways for Africa's sustainable future. Finally, I would like to introduce Dr. Tibebu Haptewold. And Tib is a senior lecturer at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and he leads the vector biology group at the Malawi Liverpool program. And he has over 2 decades of experience in entomology and vector biology, and has recently led the African research team at the Ifakara Health Institute in Tanzania that developed the first transgenic mosquito capable of blocking malaria transmission using gene drive technology. And prior to this, he spearheaded malaria research capacity building at the Jimma University in Ethiopia, Makerere in Uganda, and his work integrates genetic engineering and vector biology as well. So thank you very much. And I will then go straight right into our discussion today. And I will start by focusing our discussion on capacity building. And capacity building is an ongoing challenge in the global South. And there has to be ways in which we can improve this. And so I'd like to direct this question especially to Professor Tolula Oni and to Professor Tibebu.
Thank you so much, Janet, and colleagues. It's a real honor to be here to have this very important conversation. I'm really glad to see so many people engaging on this topic. Thank you, too, for the kind introduction. This is a topic that is really close to my heart for very obvious reasons, Janet and colleagues. So, as you mentioned, I focus on the nexus between health and climate in cities. I also focus a lot primarily on young people. And you can see that this is both a global issue and an issue that Africa is really at the coalface of. So the continent is the most rapidly urbanizing region globally. We have the lowest baseline in terms of the proportion of people living in cities. So we often still think of the continent as being rural, but it is urbanizing much more rapidly than any other continent. We also have the youngest population. And so for me, when we talk about something that is focused on young people and focused on cities, it is a really important opportunity for Africa to play a leading role in shaping how we think about cities for health and climate resilience globally. Now, the other thing that frames our approach is the timing of the opportunity. And I do think that's important to impress the urgency of this conversation. So, for example, we know that over two-thirds of the investment in urban infrastructure that is to be deployed in Africa until 2050 is yet to be deployed. Think about that for a moment. We're building the cities now, and the opportunity to shape health and to shape climate resilience cannot be overstated. But in order to do that, we really need our global intellectual capital, both on the continent and in the diaspora, to address what we see, what are these transboundary issues. And so our approach to thinking about ways of diaspora leaders can contribute is firstly looking at how these contributions can deliver triple wins. Wins for the continent, wins for the diaspora countries of residence, and wins for these wicked problems that we face. And so that is what has informed our approach. So I'm professor and chair at Cambridge University, and I also founded Urban Better. And we, as part of that Urban Better Academy model, is very much informed by this. So the Urban Better Academy is a distributed center of excellence that is located in universities on the continent and in the diaspora. And actually, and the idea is to harness this intellectual capital to support city leaders on the continent and to support youth pushing for action on the ground. And so this is why, from my perspective, we set up the first ever center focused on this. So at Cambridge University, we now have a Cambridge African Diaspora Center for Healthy, Hopeful Urban Futures. And it really is exactly this, to think about how can we move beyond episodic and more ad hoc engagement to having a platform that supports that infrastructure for action-oriented research to support city leaders, that cultivates skills for agency to equip the next generation of leaders to drive healthy urban transformation, of building coalitions across sectors. And this is why we frame, and I think we're not the first to talk about this, saying how can diaspora engagement be viewed as a form of transnational knowledge diplomacy? Because in thinking about that, we're thinking about how to ensure that we have a platform where, in addition to planned work, planned engagement, we have a resource that we can tap into whenever we need that on the continent. I've had conversations with city leaders on the continent where they say, when we need input on, water, Cape Town is zero. We have a huge amount of expertise in that globally, and yet when we need it urgently, we don't have easy access to that to understand where that intellectual capital is distributed. And so that's for me, I think I would say on this particular, and this is unique to this topic area, is when we're thinking about this engagement and contributing in terms of capacity building, in terms of mentorship, that we're moving from that kind of episodic matching to think about infrastructure and institutional mechanisms that allow us to tap into that in unresponsive when we have climate emergencies, when we have cities that actually want to drive action, when we have young people in civil society that need intellectual capital to deepen their impact and accelerate healthy urban transformation, and they have access to this. And so maybe I'll end there, because I know that there's much more room for discussion on this, and I could go on forever.
Great, thank you very much, Professor Tolu-Laoni. And Tib, over to you now. Great.
Yeah, I think Janet, that we both working with colleagues at Imperial College for a long time, and as all diaspora you are, I think all that we are not like mushrooms grown 24 hours. We are the ones develop ourselves fighting iron ceilings. And that process helped us to gain lots of experience, lots of knowledge, and we have got a rich experience we gained here and there. The other thing, I think what's in my heart is Africa shouldn't be doing a catch-up science, catch-up research. Africa can lead research. as my colleague Tululu said, that we have potential of young brains packed in every country you go. And with a little opportunity opened, we can unravel lots of great things in Africa, and we can actually lead science in the world. The good example is myself and my team. We took big risk when we said we can do transgenic mosquitoes that can stop malaria transmission in Africa. And when I took that lead, I was discouraged. You will never ever have transgenic mosquito being developed in Africa. And I think that was very discouraging. I said that, okay, I take it. And then if I fail Africa. And we set up a young African team, very, very junior. Within 6 months, we proved the world wrong that Africa can lead greater science with a little input. So Africans need opportunities. Africans need recognition and encouragement, and then we can prove that we can break a cycle of catch-up science. We can pioneer science. I think that's the experience I have now. I got another opportunity to come to Malawi to take on another opportunity, which I can build up things from scratch with African friends and scientists and junior fellows. And we will prove that we can do greater science, and we can have a solution for our people, our problems. And we have to stop looking for elsewhere, although we need support, although we will need to collaborate, although we need connection with our colleagues in the North. But African diaspora are packed with knowledge, experiences, ups and downs, and we need really recognition to release our opportunities and invest back to our continent. Thank you very much.
Excellent submission there from both Dr. Tabe and Prof. Tulula. And I have taken note of two sentences there with Tibebu saying we can do greater science. We should not just want to receive, but we can also establish some really important programs in Africa. And with Tolu saying that diasporans should engage as a form of transnational knowledge and transnational knowledge diplomacy. And I think those are really, really important points to take note of. And in doing this, I think that we need to work together with our African governments and African institutions in order to be able to implement these measures. And so I will now move on to Professor Gordon Nawandare and Professor Ahere Omonhua as well from RF. And I'd like to bring to you the question on how can African governments and institutions implement measures that can be incentives for diaspora returnees so that we can have joint activities, joint funding calls, joint mobility accords in order to be able to foster equitable partnerships that people like Tib and Professor Tulula can easily work together with to bring diaspora knowledge into place on the African continent. Over to you, Professor Gordon Nawandare.
Thank you very much, and hello to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be part of this conversation. For us on the continent, I believe that what we need to do is to create an enabling environment at the institutional level to incentivize our brothers and sisters in the diaspora to engage and work with us. And I think in the universities in particular, we often have the challenge of being overly conservative and having set ways of doing things. And it becomes very difficult to work around what the regular processes are. And you often have, administrative staff who do not understand the broader context of what you are trying to do as an institution. And they just think that their job is to enforce university regulations and policies without any room to maneuver. And that becomes one of the biggest impediments to having productive engagements with the diaspora. So I think that first we need to have a clear strategy at the institutional level that defines what we're trying to do as an institution. And then this strategy has to be sold to the entire establishment, faculty, staff. This has to be really embedded in the entire work culture at the institution, so that people can make decisions based on the broader priorities and objectives of the institution, and not basically based on what is written on paper or what they've been doing since 1950. So for us, that's the first thing, is having a strategy that's leaning forward and being open and engaging. Then you have to revise these policies, because having the strategy is one thing, but also changing the text of the university's policies and statutes are important. You need to update your statutes to provide room for these types of engagements, to loosen some of the rigidity in university policies that administrators often use as an excuse not to allow things to work. Then you have to have flexible mechanisms of engagement. So there's not only one way that you can engage people in the diaspora. I think Susie and Tolu and Tib, they all talked about different ways that you can engage. And there has to be that flexibility that you engage each individual or each institution based on what is mutually beneficial to that particular relationship. And it doesn't necessarily translate to the next person or the next group. So there has to be that flexibility. And then another thing that universities need to be mindful of is university leaders are sometimes tempted to only work with people that are their friends, that are part of their clique, and when that happens, then you are not able to optimize the full potential of these types of partnerships, because sometimes the best person to engage in a particular partnership, it may not be your friend, may not be part of your political operation in the university. But this is the best person to engage with Fred Rose or Faduma or Nicholas, based on their interest and based on what they are doing and their competence, and their expertise. These are the best people to engage. So you need to have institutional leaders who understand the need to match people properly and match visions properly, so that you can get the optimal benefit out of this. And then the last thing I want to mention is we have to be willing to commit a little bit of resources. Sometimes we have these engagements with institutions in Africa, and everybody is like, we don't have money. Everything, we don't have money. Because basically they don't want to spend any money on anything because we don't have money. Yes, we are not well endowed, but we have a little bit of resources, both in kind and in other ways, that we can use to create these environments that allow diaspora collaboration to work. I'll give you a few examples of some of these things that I've talked about. I don't know how much time I have left.
Maybe when we come to the next session, but feel free to finish, please. Gordon.
Yeah. So I'm talking about, for example, in an institution like University of Ghana, some of the units, like my unit that work with, which is a center that I have built over the years, we specifically create a room for visiting fellows, for example. And so if somebody comes to spend time with us, they have an office space that they have a comfortable place to sit. There's a fridge, there's internet, they have access to a printer and so on and so forth. There's a bathroom nearby. It makes them comfortable. You need some money to do that, but it's not a lot of money, But if you do it, it solves a lot of problems for somebody who's coming to try to work with you. So there are some things that we need to be open to, putting a little bit of investment into these partnerships. So I'll stop there and I can come back with other examples on some of the other issues that I've talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Professor Kere, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Janet. And it's really, I'm happy to be part of this discussion. And I just want to piggyback on something that Tulu said. She mentioned moving from ad hoc engagements with diaspora to more sustainable long-term engagements. And I think that that is one of the things that African governments and institutions should look at. You must design structured platforms to engage with diaspora, keeping in mind long-term equitable partnership. Before going on, I just want to say that I have had the privilege of teaching in Africa for 20 years. And in the last 2 years, the privilege of relating with researchers from across Africa. I can tell you without a single doubt that there is enormous research talent in Africa. I have seen it in my years of teaching, and I have seen it even more in the last few years that I have been at RF. And so what we're really talking about in terms of our engagement with Africans in diaspora is knowledge exchange, working together to make things work for Africa. Now, depending on what we want to achieve as a government and as institutions for diaspora brothers and sisters, what we need to look at is, for example, are we talking about returnees? Do we want people to come back to Africa? So that is one thing we could look at. And there are incentives that we could put in place. And this has to be structured in such a way that you provide the facilities and the tools that individuals who want to come back to the continent can use. I say it must be structured because you have to look at situations where people have already, there are many countries, I would say, that have already established initiatives where they interact with diaspora, and that could be a very good starting point. And in situations like that, governments could plug into that to design programs that would attract the diaspora back to Africa. And in that structured approach, you could find situations where you could give grants to Africans in diaspora who have already established links in local institutions to come back in a gradual process. You could start, for example, with a short-term program. It's called a short-term scholars program. And that could be perhaps between 3 to 6 months. And then we could also look at things like dual affiliation, where people have the opportunity to hold positions in their countries of residence and back home in the local community. And after that, we could look at very well-organized, structured return home. But I think that, as Gordon said, there must be some level of flexibility in our engagement with the diaspora. There will be people who want to engage from where they are. And so mobility accords become very important. How can we make it easier for Africans in diaspora to come over to Africa to work and then go back, depending on how they feel they can engage best? And I think that was what Susan was talking about earlier, that there are so many ways of engaging with diaspora: mentoring, co-supervision, co-proposal writing, and things like that. And so if we look at all of these avenues, whether we're looking at returnees or looking at people who want to continuously engage with African researchers, then the different incentives that we design would have to align with these. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for those two submissions. And I think one common thread that has run through Gordon's submission as well as Professor Kere's submission is around equitable engagement, where institutional leaders must also match people with the vision of the institution for optimal benefit. And Professor Kere, I'd just like to come back to you on this, and I want you to delve a little deeper into how we can therefore integrate diaspora engagement into national and institutional scorecards for measuring impact. Because as it is now, we know diasporans come, they will do something in the country, and it will be ad hoc, as you have mentioned, and then they will go back. And probably by the time they come back, the leader they worked with has probably left that position. But in order to enhance and ensure sustainability, from your experience, how do you think we can integrate sustainable diaspora engagement into national and institutional scorecards? Over to you, Professor Kere.
Yeah, I think that structural definition of the engagement, that is not leaving it at an ad hoc basis, but rather a long-term engagement, is the starting point. For governments and institutions, one of the things that they must look at is to explicitly include diaspora engagement into their strategies. If you start at that point, then you can define the objectives that you want that engagement to the objectives that you want that engagement to do. And so one of the ways to look at this is that if you can define a specific scorecard that you want your engagement to achieve, then you can look at a framework where you can include that in your institutional strategies, in your government strategies, and so on. And so I would say that by so doing, what you do is that you present a situation where your institution or your government can measure specifically what you want to achieve by diaspora engagement. If I look specifically, for example, at R&D, then I will look at inputs such as what are the resources that your government or your institution is willing to put into diaspora engagement? What percentage of your budget or R&D budget is the government willing to put into that kind of engagement? And what number of dedicated diaspora fellowship is the institution or the government willing to engage in such a process? And so if you look at the entire spectrum of your scorecard, what you would have would be your input activities or indicators, if you like. That is the resource commitment for your diaspora engagement. And with this regard, we're looking at research and development. And then you look at the process indicators. How can you create a system and a governance structure that will enable such a diaspora engagement that is designed for research and development improvement to occur? So we could look at processes like how much time is it required for you to process the visiting scholars appointment? How can you streamline visas and work permits to help facilitate the integration of Africans in diaspora into your system? And then you can also measure the output depending on, for example, if you want to look at co-supervising students as an output that you want to achieve through your diaspora engagement. What are the number of students that have been co-supervised within the period of this engagement? So what I'm invariably saying is that you design a whole system of input, process, outcome, and output and outcome indicators that will help you measure exactly what is going on in your structured engagement with the diaspora. Now, one of the things that I would advise when you want to integrate scorecards, diaspora scorecards into institutions, is to avoid duplicating performance frameworks within institutions. Instead, what we should do is to integrate our scorecards into the institutions and then link these scorecards to incentives. I'm going to give examples of the African Centers of Excellence that Gordon mentioned earlier. I was the project coordinator of one of such centers. And one of the things that really worked in that center was to itemize the engagement that you wanted to have with scholars from outside the country and integrate them into frameworks within the institution, including promotion criteria. And this really helped to strengthen the institution with respect to the outputs they were given. A classic example, for example, was when we engaged some researchers from the United States to work with our students at the center. And so it started out as mentoring, and I think Susan mentioned something like that, but it progressed on to co-supervision, and then the writing of proposals together and leading research groups. And so these inputs into institutions can help determine in a structural way how you can engage diaspora and at the end of the day have significant impact that can be recorded either on the institutional or national level. And this, of course, can promote transparency and competitiveness with respect to how institutions engage Africans in diaspora. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Here, for that submission. Really, really important. And you have repeatedly mentioned research and development. And we know that today, research and development is a very hot topic in Africa, especially with the establishment of the Africa Manufacturing Agency and the need to manufacture drugs and vaccines in Africa being very, very important, important topics at the moment. And so I would now like to move us on to another part of the conversation where I would like to now bring in Professor Ife Anibo as well as Professor Susan Winks into the conversation, and just around the issue of Grand Challenges Drug Discovery, the Grand Challenges Drug Discovery Accelerator, as well as the Callistus Juma Fellowships, both of which are familiar to you. What lessons do you think we can learn from programs like this? Because we know they've involved both scientists that are based on the continent as well as diaspora scientists. And so what can we learn from these programs in order to inform scalable diaspora support for African research and development infrastructure? And of course, apart from the Callistus Juma Fellowships, as well as the Grand Challenges Drug Discovery Accelerator, it would also be great if you can mention some other examples that we can also learn from. Over to you, Professor Ife.
Thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be on this panel. As a recipient of the Callistus Juma Science Fellowship, I see very interesting lessons that we can learn. And it's not because they're perfect or it's like fully scalable, but I think because they eliminate what actually works when we actually link global expertise to like African institutions. So one of the most important lessons is that the diaspora engagement, I think, must be institutional rather than purely individual driven. And whilst some of the grants would focus on the individual, I think there's always this focus on the institution and creating that infrastructure that allows that scientist to thrive. So the Callistus Juma Fellowship demonstrates the power of embedding an African scientist within a globally respected institution, whether that be you being in a globally respected institution on the African continent or having partnerships with diaspora institutions, institutions in the diaspora. And also diaspora scientists who actually have a particular expertise in a particular field. And what happens is that when we get exposure to governance models like that, we're able to have those sort of leadership cultures embedded. So the value, I think, is not just in the technical training, but immersing within the systems that function at scale. But I think that for diaspora engagement to strengthen African R&D, infrastructure, I think that this embedding must actually operate in both directions. So it's not enough for individuals to just gain experience abroad. I think that there must be a very structured pathway for transferring the institutional practices where they're coming from, and even things like, for example, research management systems back to, or partnership models back to this African institution. I think a second point that I've thought about is infrastructure, access to infrastructure. I actually think that access to infrastructure matters as much as the grants. And I say this because before I actually even, because I've been working in England for a couple of years and then I moved to Nigeria to do science. But before even doing that, I can actually piggyback on what Professor Gordon said. I've been actually a recipient of the Research Fellowship Office because I had to come from England to Nigeria and I couldn't really find my footing. And he had this WACPIP center that had really good infrastructure and systems in place that could support me at the time, a diaspora scientist, to come into the African continent to actually do really good science. So I think that the grand challenges, for example, gives a very good, the drug discovery for the Grand Challenge is a very good example, because it provides researchers with like access to infrastructure, for example, maybe compound libraries or screening platforms. And all of this, I think, increases their productivity. Many African scientists are obviously very highly capable, but we are constrained by limited access to high-end tools. And I think the diaspora support programs, if we are to create this, you know, have to really take into account this point, because we're often focused on mentoring, which is important, by the way, or visiting professorship, it also is important. But I think that they're very valuable, but I just don't think they're sufficient enough. If, for example, the core bottleneck that we're actually grappling with is an infrastructure problem. So I think that a scalable model must therefore prioritize like a shared platform. So we have, for example, regional sequencing centers, you know, we have bioinformatic cloud systems, we have translational research facilities right now in West Africa that we can actually leverage on. And I think that these are the kind of things that we can actually learn, because I think that, you know, infrastructure is actually the multiplier that actually converts talent into output. And I think the last thing that I'll talk about here is the scientist as a leader. I think leadership development is so important. And I think this is one thing that both the Drug Discovery Platform and the Callister Dreamer Fellowship really hones in on really nicely. It's getting a bunch of technically skilled people and training them also, not just the technical area, but ensuring that they have other leadership qualities, like in science leadership, in communication, science communication, policy literacy, strategic thinking, and recognizing that scientific ecosystems fail, not just only due to technical gaps, but also because there are governance weaknesses on the African continent that exist. And so we need to be empowered to be able to kind of like, you know, go through all of that. I think African R&D infrastructure requires capable institutional leaders who can understand other aspects, for example, research financing, regulatory environment, because again, the regulatory ecosystem is also very tricky, and also procurement systems. I mean, I know that the procurement conversation is an African-wide issue, but I think that us now trying to understand how to get over that hurdle is very important as well. So I think that scalable support must therefore integrate all of these leadership qualities, and this is how I think that we can build a sustainable model. If designed very thoughtfully, I think that engagement can evolve from maybe a symbolic gesture into like a central pillar of African R&D infrastructure development. And we could get one that actually integrates global expertise whilst also building sustainable domestic systems.
Great. Thank you, Ify. Susan, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Janet. I love where this discussion is going. I think from our experience, I want to reiterate what we have seen in the past is allowing that small catalytic start and then letting it grow. So I know we go back to mentorship in the sense that mentorship is such a small commitment for a diaspora scientist to give, to be able to mentor an emerging scientist, but the fruits of that relationship are massive. So we have two pathways. The one is we've seen repeatedly that emerging researchers on the continent, I'll reiterate what everyone else has said, they're doing fantastic science, but perhaps they don't have the confidence to actually take their ideas forward, or they don't believe that they are globally worthy in a sense. And what we see is that as soon as you match them with an international scientist who says, yes, that's actually a good idea, the confidence of those individuals just blossoms in the most beautiful way. And then they're able to step forward into their careers. And we're seeing our mentees just step into new jobs, step into leadership roles, realize that they can actually do it. And that's just from the confidence of having connected with someone from around the world, from the diaspora, who's actually come back and said, yes, what you're doing in your local country is actually relevant and you are world class. So that confidence boost, and I'll just throw in a quick comment, especially for the female scientists, having those mentorship relationships to help them boost their confidence is critical. So even if that's all we get out of it, the catalytic effect for those individuals in helping boost their careers is massive, as well as using that mentorship to help link them in with other networks, which are going to be critical for them to build their careers. Okay, so if that's all we get from it, I still think that's a massive win. But what we have seen time and time again is you start small, and our diaspora scientists are engaging. They're seeing that they can give, they're seeing the effect, and they're so motivated and moved by it that they want to give more. And I think back to all the discussions we've had around, are we ready to accommodate bigger engagement from the diaspora? You know, are we ready to welcome them into our facilities? Are we ready to actually have collaborative projects with them and not get stuck in institutional bureaucracy for 10 months writing up a legal agreement? We need to be ready to let that relationship blossom, that trust build, and then to get the bigger engagement. And I think this is where we can start. Get them involved in an easy way and then build on that. I did want to pick up on the one other theme that I saw emerging, and that is just the theme around manufacturing. And I guess this is also a passion of mine. I don't just want to see us doing tech transfer from developed countries to Africa. We need our diaspora to engage with Africa, to innovate and come up with better, more efficient manufacturing processes here in Africa, because we absolutely can. And why should we reproduce what's being done elsewhere when we can do it better? And that's an area of diaspora engagement that I would love to see grow and grow. Thanks, Janet.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. So I really like a thread of discussion that's come out of that, and from the Calestas Juma Fellowships, and mentioned by Ify, and also Susan here mentioning regarding mentorship. And mentorship, as we know, is a very important aspect of any career development, especially for those who are coming from the African continent. And so we know, and of course, a lot of us on this call have benefited from such mentorship. And so this would then mean that we'd need to pilot some programs on the continent, especially along important lines of research, lines of scientific innovation that are not well established on the continent. And I think one of those areas could be cell line development, for example, something that I know Gordon works on all the time, and also biomanufacturing, which of course, as I mentioned earlier, is becoming a very hot topic. And so we are now moving into where the ADN is establishing itself as the Grand Challenges Africa Diaspora Engagement Accelerator. So to Tib, Gordon, and Ify, I would just like to ask you that, what do you think is the role that the Grand Challenges African Diaspora Engagement Accelerator, what do you think is the role we can play in piloting programs in some high priority areas? Ify, I know genomics is one of your favorite areas, and Gordon, cell line development, and Tib, genetic mosquito releases, but expanding that as well, what do you think is the role we can play in piloting some of these areas? And I would start with you, Ify.
Okay, thank you so much. I actually think that the biomanufacturing, even though I'm not directly involved in that, I think it's a really good system. I'm really passionate about seeing what that looks like in the future. But I think that the Grand Challenges ADEA, I think, can help with de-risking early infrastructure investment, because if I think about biomanufacturing facilities, they require, like you can imagine, really high capital and has a very long, period of payback. So I think that government and private investors will obviously be very hesitant. And if you think about the African continent, we have multiple focuses when we think about non-communicable diseases and infectious diseases. And so where do you exactly put your money? So I think that the system can help with, just de-risking all of that, and providing whatever evidence that, the government institutions or private sector needs, without really committing when there is no evidence of perhaps a product or even a pipeline viability. I think that it can provide catalytic funding, which I think it's doing to support early stage platform build out. And also, I think that this then reduces the uncertainty that investors or even the government might have when we think about creating a credible pathway for maybe blended financing or financing participation later in the future. So I think that's one of the things that sticks out to me, is that it just creates a very nice sort of ecosystem and de-risks all of that process before we actually have product on the pipeline.
Thank you for that. And I'd hand over to Gordon. We have quite a few questions from the audience, which I'd like to get to. So Gordon, a quick one there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, I think that what would be really useful is to give opportunities for diaspora scientists to spend some time on the continent with the goal of helping with the deficit in capacity in terms of senior scientists who can, mentor young scientists. I sit here and I'm overextended with the number of young people who need support from me, who need me to help them with their grants, help them with their manuscript, help them with designing their research projects, and so on and so forth. And I think that if we could create a partnership with institutions of excellence or centers of excellence that we have on the continent, where you have, a group of young people, you have a pipeline of young people coming through, and you can provide the opportunity for senior diaspora scientists to come and, spend some time and support the development of young careers like that. And then also gives them an opportunity to build an affiliation with the institution, which they can build on going back. I'll give you an example. So the University of Ghana, we have this program that we call the Diaspora Linkage Program. I'm sure some of you may have heard about it. That was supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. And this, over the last 10 years, has brought in over 90 African scholars back to the university, to various departments, to spend between 6 months to 1 year here. And a good number of these have either ended up transitioning back here permanently, or they've maintained ongoing research collaboration with the departments that they've worked with. And some have also, mentored younger faculty who have then become established themselves. So the impact has been so, so strong from this program that I think if we could do something like that, especially for R&D, for the sciences, for the, discovery work, for enterprise development, for drug discovery, and so on and so forth. If we have a program specifically for people to come and do that type of work on the continent for a short period of time and build those partnerships, which can then become sustainable partnerships, and which we hope would give a pathway for some of these people to come back and stay permanently if they come and they're able to, adapt and basically integrate into the system as we would expect.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Gordon. And now, Teb, just before I go to some of the questions from our audience. Over to you, Teb.
Yeah, mine will be very, very short. I think what I see is that the value, the potential of diaspora to change research, to support research, to enhance research in Africa is really under-recognized, especially with funders' point of view. It's not easy risk that the diaspora takes to come into Africa, establish things, start from scratch. By the time you do something, you are lost in your competitive edge out there. So we are fighting two big issues, like, and then the funders are, I think, Gordon, you said a click-based working thing in the funders being developed. If you have got Grand Challenges funding from Gates Foundation, you have better chance you're going to get that renewed than a new risky kind of new emerging talents from diaspora are going to get that fundings. So I think the funders, research and development funders, should look at the potential that diaspora could have. I'm not saying that we just throw money into because you are diaspora and throw money into you, but there should be a way of tailor the kind of funding, looking at the long term, looking to multiple impact, mentorship. The amount of knowledge we're going to bring in is huge. So I think there should be a tailored way of funding and looking high risk funding, but high return funding kind of thing should be looked at. So I think it's a big struggle for us to compete out there in where we are. And by the time we come back here, we lost 3-4 years of building things from scratch and we are way behind. And the funders do not take that into account. They'll take account of how much science you published, how often you go to big meetings and have handshakes. So we don't have handshakes. For the last 3 years when I'm in Tanzania, I didn't have handshakes with big guys. But although I have science publication, first transgenic in Africa, but with the funders, that's a lost case. So I think that kind of things should be looked at. We are high risk but high return kind of potentials. When donors look into things. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Tib. Very well put there. And so now I will close this part of the discussion and really want to go into some of the questions from our audience. So really thank you to the panelists for all of your contributions and submissions. So I have a question here from Rebecca, and I think I will refer this question to Professor Ahere. And the question is, the African Finance Corporation states that funds are not the issue, since the continent has an estimated $4 trillion in untapped resources. The challenge is innovation and institutional reforms to apply these funds to address current financial challenges, infrastructure and sustainability plans. What do you recommend we do with that? Professor Ahere, please, a very quick one. I have 2 other burning questions that I'd also like for us to be able to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the implementation of policies and strategies in Africa is heavily dependent on political will. Unfortunately, that is the case in Africa. But I don't think that that means that we cannot do things. So even within those challenges in policies and the rest, these are areas where institutions and even governments can engage experts from within and outside Africa to tackle it. And so, yes, there are funds that are available. Unfortunately, they are sometimes misdirected and not used properly. And so that political will needs to be there. There is a lot of heterogeneity in Africa. You see some countries that are doing really well. And however you look at it, it's from a strong political will that you see that kind of good performance. And you can see it clearly. You have more diasporas moving towards such countries because there's stability, there's relative institutional readiness and things like that. So there must be that political will and that institutional readiness within Africa to accommodate Africans in diaspora. And if you don't get it in one region or one country, then please don't discount other regions, because the whole idea is to build infrastructure within Africa. So yes, it exists, but we can overcome it. I just wanted to quickly chip in with the last discussion about biomanufacturing to say that there are some researchers within Africa who are really pioneering such ideas. And so ADN, through the grant challenges, can look at matchmaking as an option to get these researchers into a position to meet Africans in diaspora who can really work to set up these manufacturing processes in Africa. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I can see that your mention of matchmaking will go towards answering a few questions that I see in the chat as well regarding how scientists in the African Diaspora Network can intentionally collaborate with African students in the US and in other parts of the northern continent institutions. I'd like to put a question to Professor Gordon from Alula, who says, we are a group working in the area of research and evidence generation and want to collaborate with African diaspora in writing relevant proposals that respond to the needs for evidence. So, Gordon, very quickly, would you help Alula to understand what would be the practical approach to collaborate, secure resources, and conduct research that can be responsive and catalytic? Over to you, Gordon.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I think this goes to my comment I made earlier about the need for, this type of support, senior scientists who can support young people who have brilliant ideas and they need that type of guidance. I can say that I would be happy to support you, but then there's a long queue of people who have asked me the same question, and I can't even cope, So that's why it's really important to help with that gap in senior scientists on the continent who can really support these young people. Akera mentioned about the talent on the continent. Those of us who work in capacity building, we see it every day. You see the level of talent amongst the young people on this continent and the energy and enthusiasm that they have. And you just feel sorry that you don't have the time to spend with all these people and help them develop their ideas and turn them into, great research projects or to get research funding or even to start a business. There's so much, but we have a gap. We have a big base, but the middle and top is very, very light. And that's where I really think the diaspora can come in and help us to support the young people so that in the next 10 years, we will grow that middle and upper part of the human resource here, especially in the sciences. So please feel free to get in touch with me. Let's see how we can support you. If I can't myself, I can direct you to people who can work with you. So I think I've put all our contacts on the chat. So feel free to contact any of us whose background is most aligned with what you're trying to do, and we'll do our best to support and put you in touch with the relevant people who can support.
Excellent. Thank you, Gordon, for being very open to supporting the development of the critical mass of African scientists. Of course, something that has been a passion of yours for as long as I've known you. Thank you so much for that. So, in the interest of time, Prof. Anibo, there's one question that I'd really like you to tackle really quickly on R&D partnerships always failing because of the friction in finding specific project-ready experts at the right time. Do you believe the path forward for diaspora is through informal networking or institutionalizing our availability through digital platforms? I'm sure you know the answer to this one, so over to you, Ify. Thank you.
So I was going to ask, when she or he says that, the project ready, where is this project? Is it in the diaspora or is it on the African continent? I don't think informal networking is the way to go. I would like things to be more institutionalized. And if people have availability to get into, working relationships, that has to be institutionalized. Now, if it's from the diaspora to the African continent, of course, we understand why that's very important. Things are documented and done properly. There's very clear, equitable transactions going on there, whether that be the number of people working on the project, where you're getting the samples from, how you're going to share that data. I can go on and on about that. But if this is on the African continent, I think that it's important, if you want to work with projects, if you're talking about project ready on the African continent, experts, I think that it's important, again, to institutionalize it, but I think it's important to also go based on the national strategy. So if, for example, I have a project in malaria drug resistance that I'm thinking about, I would rather have, and because this is my national strategy as well, I would want to have a working relationship with a diaspora expert that also can contribute that. It might not be genomics necessarily. It could be other aspects, you know, it could be chemistry, it could be epidemiology, it could be AI, machine learning, it could be so many other aspects. So I think thinking about a way to plug all of that into what the, you know, local researcher and what the national country strategy is, I think that that's also the way to go. So I wasn't sure if the question is going this direction for the diaspora or the African continent, but I hope that I've sort of covered it. I hope so.
And if whichever direction, I believe you have given it just the right answer, because when we institutionalize things, then we are also able to do strategic alignment, aligning the research idea with the institutional strategy in the specific country where the research is going to happen. And so as I bring us to the near end of our session, I would just like to turn to Professor Tolula Oni and just ask you to give us some key takeaways. So very quickly, just 2 to 3 takeaways before I hand over back to Nicholas to bring us to a close. Prof. Tolu.
Oh, thanks, Janet. Thanks for the very easy task of drawing a rich conversation to a close. I will do it in 3 minutes, but I'll give you 5 key takeaways from what I've heard, right? The first is the importance of moving from catch-up science to co-creation and being at the frontier of discovery. So it's been pointed out that, you know, the importance of co-producing research for innovation, because we hold a lot of research talent, and there's that opportunity to create ecosystems that can also de-risk investment. It was pointed out under this around the importance of catalytic funding, which actually reduces uncertainty for governments and investors and establishing credible pathways for research to impact. So that is a critical pathway to moving from catch-up science. So that's the first. The second is the importance of positioning diaspora engagement as transnational knowledge diplomacy. And in this context, is thinking about diaspora researchers not just as contributors, but as strategic bridge builders, right, across borders, generating decision support to the policy legible, strengthening civil society, working constructively with governments. But this engagement must be bidirectional, ensuring that generating value globally to address these global issues. And particularly given Africa's demographic trajectory, the diaspora will continue to grow. We're the youngest continent, and we're the world's workforce, right? So thinking proactively about this architecture is needed to harness this expanding knowledge capital across borders. The third point is shifting from ad hoc missions to institutionalized long-term strategy. A couple of people alluded to this, and I didn't mention this, but we did some research in 2020 and looked at which African countries had diaspora engagement policies, and we found 21 of the African countries actually do. And a lot of this, obviously remittances and investments dominate, but there is this shifting recognition of the value of the knowledge capital. But a lot of those initiatives still remain very short-term, very fragmented, very mission-based. And so this next phase of moving to a more institutionalized long-term strategy requires us embedding diaspora engagement within national R&D strategies with measurable goals and logic models, as was very eloquently articulated, aligning objectives with national innovation priorities, dedicating resource commitments, and integrating within national performance scorecards while avoiding duplication, but also importantly, flexible approaches that recognize multiple forms of engagement. The fourth is building enabling institutional environments that are equitable and support sustained engagement. And mechanisms that were cited include dual affiliations and joint programs, structured diaspora fellowships with phased engagement, co-supervision, seed grants that gradually deepen collaboration, and critically access to research infrastructure, such as shared mechanisms for drug discovery. And the fifth point is recognizing diaspora as a strategic multiplier for global Africa. And this is a cross-cutting reflection, because I think across the board, we've noted that Africa does not lack talent, but what we need is the durable architecture that connects this talent across borders, thinking about our distributed capital as global Africa that enable us to generate shared value, advance scientific excellence, and strengthen institutions across the board. But these institutions, these architectures can act as multipliers that convert, as I think it was Ife that said, converting talent into impact through very intentional, reciprocal, and long-term investment. And key to leadership, to achieving this multiplier effect is leadership. And I'm really glad that if you mentioned this, because researchers must be developed beyond the technical disciplines and equipped with a broad range of skills that address that help build institutional capability, so that diaspora engagement can strengthen research ecosystems, policy relevance, and global influence. And those are just some thoughts on how we can think about diaspora engagement that in a way that could become a cornerstone of Africa's research and innovation infrastructure and future. So I hope that does some justice to
Yes.
the breadth of what has been captured today.
Thank
Over
you,
to you.
thank you. Thank you. You have nailed it. And I couldn't ask for a better panel. I believe we have really done well with this discussion, and I really appreciate the time that you have put in for joining us. So thank you very much. And I will now hand over to Nicholas to just give us some wrap-up remarks and close. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All very much for your contributions. My colleague Omalayo Oyudo, who is ADN's Director of Programs and Operations, will actually close us out. So over to you, Omalayo.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. And thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Janet, I could not agree with you more. What a rich discussion. I was taking so many notes and was getting ready to summarize. And then Dr. Tolula, you, like, that summary was 10 out of 10. I was telling the team in the chats, I'm like, let's just take Dr. Oni's summary and use that as the event recap, because it was perfect. She didn't miss any points. So thank you so much. A true professor. Through and through. We truly appreciate you, but just wanted to, thank Janet and, our contact setter, Susan, thank you. And, all the panelists, to Bebu, and I'm trying to through my to make sure I don't miss anyone. Ife, Dr. Omonkua, thank you all so much and Gordon, of course. Thank you for the rich discussion. There was so many takeaways that Dr. Oni already mentioned, and so I won't repeat them. But some of the things that I thought really brought this conversation together was that there's work to be done at the institutional level, which has already been summarized. Then there's also work to be done at the individual level, particularly around supporting young people. And then also, I thought there was a thread of conversation coming out about going beyond just the mentorship that we are doing, but also opening doors, building trust, investing, right? Putting our money where our mouth is, and, putting our name on things that we trust and we support in order to support innovation on the continent. And I loved, I think it was Susan who mentioned, supporting not just tech transfer, but rather innovation that is contextual to the continent. I think that is so important. And then also, I wanted to mention this. I don't know how many non-scientists we have on the call, but I was thinking while everybody was talking, okay, what is the takeaway for the non-scientists? So those of us who aren't going to support with the vaccine research, benefit from it, yes, but can't contribute directly to it. What are we meant to do, right? And so I think for me, some of the takeaways for the non-scientists on the call would be, being able to open doors, building trust, having an opportunity to connect people, right? So if you heard something on this call and you're like, oh, I have a friend who's doing XYZ, let me connect them, right? Be the ears and eyes of your friends and colleagues in this sector, right? I think that's the call for those of us who can't necessarily contribute on the scientific side. We can contribute on the ecosystem side. We can contribute on the policy side. We can contribute on the advocacy side and on the trust side. So just wanted to give that call to action. If there was any other non-scientists on the call that was like, what should I do? And then for everybody on the call, scientists, entrepreneurs, innovators, investors alike, we are going to continue this conversation at ADES. So in just a month's time, we are going to be at the African Diaspora Investment Symposium in Santa Clara University. in California, we are going to have a dedicated workshop on this conversation, but also throughout the 3 days of the convening, we are going to talk about how do we institutionalize these conversations, right? How do we turn a lot of the key takeaways that we're taking here into the policy that will take us forward, that will ensure that we are able to center and support African innovation, right? So if you want to be a part of that conversation, if you want to be a part of building what the next stage of this program looks like, I encourage you to please register to join us at ADES in California. And then in 2027, we are also going to bring ADES to the continent. So we're really looking forward to that. If you want to find out more about that, please register for our newsletter. We keep information, all the information and all the work that we are doing, we share with our newsletter subscribers first and foremost. And so I definitely just want to invite everyone to continue partaking in building what the Grand Challenges African Diaspora Engagement Accelerator will look like, what it's possible for it to do in really building out this institutional infrastructure that we all know is just the missing link to unleash Africa's innovation. So I trust that you will all be joining us soon. So thank you all so much for being here, and have a great rest of your time zone.
Thank you so much.